evening and welcome to this virtual forum featuring candidates for Congressional District 6, organized by the League of Women Voters of Monmouth County. I am Evelyn Murphy, president of the Monmouth County League. My pronouns are she and her. I live in Neptune. The League of Women Voters is a 104-year-old nonprofit, nonpartisan political organization. This means that we never support or oppose individual candidates or political parties. Membership in the league is open to everyone age 16 or older of any gender who supports our mission to empower voters and defend democracy. Our Monmouth County chapter is the largest in New Jersey with 380 members. We invite all of you to consider joining. Membership provides opportunities to be involved in unique activities supporting the political process. As a member, you could organize or moderate a candidates forum like this one. You could register voters in schools and at local festivals. You could attend county, municipal, or school board meetings as an observer to let officials know that the league is watching. If any of this sounds interesting and you want to join us, please log on to our website and become a member. If you live in the Middlesex County area, consider joining the very active Greater New Brunswick area chapter at lwvgnba.com. Turning now to tonight's forum, a recording will be available for viewing on our website, lwvmonmouth.org, and on vote411.org, the League's national nonpartisan voter guide. The candidates have agreed that no other recording of the event for any purpose is permitted. Use of screenshots or portions of the official recording is not allowed. Our trained and experienced moderator for tonight's forum is Sharon Steinhorn. As required by league rules, the moderator lives outside of the voting area. Here is Sharon to introduce the forum and the candidates.
Good evening. Thank you, Evelyn, and hello to all of the candidates and to all of our viewers. Thank you, the viewers, for your interest in wanting to learn about the candidates for Congressional District 6. There are 5 candidates running for this position. All 5 have been invited and all 5 have agreed to participate here tonight to share their views and respond to your questions. And so let me introduce you to them in alphabetical order. Welcome to Fahad Akhtar, who represents the Common Sense Independent Party, to Matthew Amatrano, Libertarian Party, to Scott Fegler of the Republican Party, to Frank Pallone Jr., the Democratic Party, and to Herb Tarbus from the Green Party. And these candidates have agreed to the following format, as well as to the fact that this is the property of the League of Women Voters and can only be shared in its entirety. And so the forum has 3 parts. The first part will be their opening statements, and each candidate has been offered 2 minutes, and the order has been determined ahead of time. I will call on them each at the right moment. The questions is the second part of our forum, and you, the voters, have submitted questions in advance of the forum. The questions have been screened to avoid redundancy, to ensure relevance to the office, to eliminate personal attacks, and certainly to provide a broad range of topics. All the candidates are given the opportunity to respond to every question if they choose, and the responses are limited to 90 seconds, and we will get in as many as we can in about an hour. And finally, the last part is 1 minute of a closing statement. And that also, the order has been decided ahead of time, and that will give each candidate the opportunity to share their positions and reasons for running. And want to tell the onlookers that we have a timekeeper, and just to let you know that our timekeeper is Mona, and she will alert the candidates with a yellow, what would you like to show the audience? They'll have 30 seconds left to speak for when their time is up, and then at the time there is the stop, and they'll be watching that, and so will I, and they will be allowed to certainly finish their sentence. And so we will begin with 2-minute opening statements from the first candidate, Mr. Akhtar.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Fahad Akhtar. A quick background on me. I began my professional career in the Obama White House as a writer, after which I decided it would be fun to make some money. So I pivoted to financial services and spent the early half of my career working at BlackRock, working on investment products and investment stewardship. Afterward, I got an MBA, and instead of going and making a lot of money afterward, I had an itch for public service. And so I spent some time at the DoD as an innovation fellow working on Chinese counterintelligence projects. And soon after, I joined the FBI as a special agent. I spent several years with the Bureau working China counterintelligence matters focused on critical infrastructure. And while there, I realized that although we have a lot of adversaries that we talk about, unfortunately, we are our own worst enemy when it comes to national security policy. And that was one of the major driving factors in my decision to run for Congress. And so my hope is that if I get elected, I will bring some of that experience to bear on my position in Congress and create policies that allow for our federal law enforcement officers and our intelligence community to actually enforce the laws that are on the books and not just find spies and watch them continue to do their harm to our national security. And in that same vein, I'm focused on bringing common sense policies to all domains of policy, including fighting crime and in ensuring that parents have rights over what their children are learning and exposed to.
Thank you, Mr. Akhtar. And second opening statement, we go to Mr. Amatrano.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for the League of Women Voters, bringing everybody together, and thank you for all the candidates for coming tonight. As a libertarian, I believe less government is what we need. That the most important thing is the individual, right? And the main purpose of the federal government is to protect the individual's rights and constitutional rights. I've lived in Piscataway, New Jersey for 15 years. I've been a police officer, currently am for over 20 years. I feel like that experience working with diverse communities will definitely help in this district. It has a lot of different towns that are very diverse, in Middlesex all the way down to Monmouth. That's pretty much it. I look forward to tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Amatrano. Next opening statement from Mr. Figler.
Well, thank you, League of Women Voters. I really appreciate you putting on tonight. Tonight, I sit here not as a career politician, but as a business leader who has spent nearly 2 decades in the food industry. I manage large teams of hardworking people. I've had the privilege of running a successful cheese plant and working on international business deals, seeing firsthand how our food systems operate differently from country to country. I'm proud of the jobs we've created, the challenges we've overcome, and the commitment we've shown to ensuring quality, affordable food for American families. But that's not why I'm here. I felt compelled to get involved because, like so many of you, I've watched in frustration as Washington has spiraled out of control. We're seeing rampant government spending that drives inflation and burdens our children with debt. We're stuck in wars overseas while neglecting the needs of our own people here at home. Our borders are wide open. We're paying the price in terms of security and stability. What brought me into this race is the belief that the American dream is still alive, but it's slipping away for far too many. As someone who has run a successful business, I know what it takes to turn things around. I'm running to bring common sense leadership to cut the waste, secure our border, and protect the American dream for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. And next candidate opening statement, Mr. Pallone.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and all the candidates and all of you watching at home this evening. And I just want to start by telling everyone that I consider it a privilege to represent people in Middlesex and Monmouth counties. I think that serving in Congress is a sacred trust, and I carry that with me every day. But I really wanted to talk about what I do to get things done in Congress. And a lot of that relates to my position as the lead Democrat on the Energy and Commerce Committee, where I've been for several years now. So let me just talk about some of the things that I've done or achieved, if you will. One is the Affordable Care Act. Some know it as Obamacare. And it's resulted in 45 million people having health insurance. And a lot of it is because of the subsidies or tax credits that we provide that make health insurance affordable. A second thing is with regard to Medicare, allowing the government to negotiate prescription, the price, if you will, for prescription drugs. The Republicans, when we first established Medicare Part D, the prescription drug benefit, were against negotiated prices, but now we have it, and that was a bill that I sponsored. Third, I want to talk about cleaning up Superfund and toxic waste sites. I was one of the architects, if you will, of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the bill that provided the biggest climate action, if you will, to try to prevent the warming of the planet. And so now we have a lot of fun to clean up our Superfund sites, to clean up our brownfield sites. And lastly, I want to mention the fact that I do believe it's very important to prevent any offshore drilling for oil and gas. And I've been very much involved with making sure that that does not happen, that there's no drilling. So for me, the most important thing is to put people over politics. That will always be my theme as a congressman. So thank you again.
Thank you. And a final opening statement, excuse me, Mr. Tarbus.
Well, thank you, Sharon. Well, I'm currently a retired systems engineer. 18 years ago, I turned my attention to politics and our political system. It was easy to see that the two-party system was failing us. The polarization was toxic and it's only gotten worse. We need alternatives. So in 2006, I decided to run for this very office as an independent to give voters an option. In 2017, I answered Bernie Sanders' call to work within the Democratic Party, winning a seat on the Middlesex County Democratic Committee. I used the position to advocate for the abolishment of the county line and other electoral reforms. In 2020, I worked with other activists to co-found Voter Choice New Jersey, an organization dedicated to bringing ranked choice voting to New Jersey. The organization has now grown to over 3,000 supporters. Ranked choice voting is a simple yet powerful upgrade to the way we vote, which has been shown to increase voter turnout while reducing negative campaigning. Yes, we desperately need alternatives to the two major parties, so this year I joined the Green 13. The Green Party of New Jersey is fielding a candidate in each of the 12 congressional districts and one for U.S. Senate. The Green Party is a people-powered, pro-worker, pro-environment, anti-war party. The Green Party stands against excessive militarization, which has become the hallmark of U.S. foreign policy. I personally oppose the extreme and reckless U.S. policy of unconditional, unlimited offensive weapons to the far-right government of Israel, weapons being used to massacre tens of thousands of innocent civilians, women, and children. The U.S. could be following its own Leahy Law or Foreign Assistance Act, or using its diplomatic leverage to de-escalate the conflict before it leads to an all-out war with Iran. I just want to thank the Monmouth League for hosting this event and inviting me to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And I'm going to start the questioning, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to ask in random order so that one person isn't always the first. And the first question, I'm just going to start with Mr. Tarbus, as long as we're there, right at your screen. And the first question for everybody will be, what are New Jersey's biggest challenges, specifically in CD6, in the next 2 to 5 years, and how do you propose fixing them? Mr. Tarbus, your question.
Well, I think that housing is probably one of the most pressing issues, and that cost of housing in CD6. And I would approach it by putting together a task force to study the housing issues. There's a proposal to create a measure, a home loss measure, similar to the unemployment rate indicator, to focus attention on the housing problem. So I would approach the housing problem by putting together a study group to understand the scope of the problem, and then I would work to bring in experts and community folks to study the problem and come up with some alternatives to hopefully get passed in Congress.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Pallone.
Well, affordability is the big issue, not only for New Jersey and our district, but also for the country. And I think one of the biggest things that needs to be done in the next year is that the Republican tax bill, which was basically a disaster for New Jersey because it eliminated the SALT deduction, or at least capped it, I should say, at $10,000. And so all of this expires in 2025. And what I would like to see is no cap on the SALT deduction. People should be able to go back to, basically be able to deduct from the federal income taxes, their state and local taxes. And then we should also reform the tax system so the tax cuts are for the middle class, not for the billionaires, not for the big corporations. And then another affordability issue is healthcare, which continues to be a concern. So as I mentioned, I was the author of negotiated prices under Medicare, but I'd like to see that, and I have a bill that would expand that to everybody so that they would be able to take advantage of those negotiated lower prices for prescription drugs, and to make sure that we still have the subsidies, which also expire, and tax credits for the Affordable Care Act, so more and more people can have health insurance that don't get it on the job. And but affordability in general is the question, both in terms of taxes, healthcare, and so many other things. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Fegler.
Yeah, absolutely. It's simple. It's affordability, right? And the inflation that has occurred in this country over the last couple of years is directly led by government spending. We spend entirely too much money as a country on a federal level. Energy is the other most important topic that is pressing for New Jersey's 6th District over the next 2 to 5 years. The chance of offshore wind to occur not only on the Jersey coast, right, but all up and down the East Coast is likely to hit the middle to lower class extremely hard. Estimates say that energy bills will increase over 40% with the implementation of offshore wind. So it's imperative that we get our priorities straight and deliver cost-effective, clean, good energy for the Americans in the 6th District.
Thank you. Mr. Amatrano?
Yes, this is easy. It's the working class can't, afford to get by anymore. And this all goes back to just wasteful spending by the federal government. And they just spend on unnecessary programs, which causes them to increase taxes, which will cause them to print money, which causes inflation. So the easiest solution is just stop spending money until we get it under control.
Okay, thank you. And last respondent, Mr. Akhtar.
Thank you. I see there's a theme here, so I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I think quality of life is actually the core of what everyone is sort of talking about here. And the way you address a deteriorating quality of life for folks in the 6th District, part of it does go to affordability. Another part of it goes to controlling crime. And the third part of it goes to ensuring that folks have access to affordable health care. And so for me, it's addressing all of these issues in tandem is the way you end up with folks achieving a better quality of life in the district. And so going to the crime portion of this, and Mr. Amatrano can correct me if my stats are a bit out of date, but in the last 2 years, there have been over 50 home invasions in the 6th District. And there have been almost 3 times as many carjackings. And with stats like that, I'm scared to send my family out, to send my kids out, to send my wife out, because it's not a safe place the way it used to be in the 6th District. There are towns where multiple neighbors on the same street have experienced armed people breaking into their homes. People are asking about how to put up cameras, about how to buy a firearm. And if these sorts of problems are not addressed through better policies and better policing and more funding for law enforcement, we're not going to be able to ensure a good quality of life. And in tandem, you have to give people access to the basic necessities of life so they don't resort to crime. And that's where these affordability portions that other folks were talking about come into play, or these affordability policies come into play.
Thank you.
Finally,
Your time is up, but
I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't see that.
thank you. Yeah, keep your eye on it. Next question, and let me just say that if at any time anybody wants me to repeat a question, feel free to just, ask. That certainly is understandable if you need that. The next question, we're going to start with Mr. Fegler, and the question is, What, if anything, should our country do over the long term to ensure quality health care at an affordable cost for all? Mr. Fegler.
Thanks so much for asking us such a great question. I think healthcare is of utmost importance, and we can continue to dump billions of dollars and negotiate with pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies and bring the cost of drugs down. But the issue really in America, right, is that our food system is completely tainted. And Americans, right, are eating ultra processed foods. Diseases like diabetes are affecting 50% of the population is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Statistically speaking, in 1950, less than 1% of people were diabetic. We have a major problem with our food system, and it absolutely needs to be addressed. I'm in a unique position because over the last 15 years, I've been looking at imported foods, and I've traveled all over the world looking at ingredient statements and products from all over the world. And what we put in our food system is really killing us in America. So we absolutely need to change our food system. That will fix the healthcare system. 80% of medical schools do not teach a single nutrition class, not a single one, right? We absolutely need to fix our food system, and that'll fix our healthcare system.
Okay, thank you. Same question to Mr. Amitrano.
Yeah,
Mr. Amitrano, could you move a little closer to the microphone?
okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, as Mr. Fegler was saying, access to healthy food, real food is key. Like everybody should have that. We're the wealthiest nation in the country. There's no reason why we have to get cheap on food. Healthcare, like libertarians are usually against government having anything to do with our lives, but I feel like healthcare is just one of those things that's too important, and there's no reason everybody shouldn't be able to get to a doctor when they need to, get a surgery when they need to. It's like we should be looking out for every American citizen with their health. Thank you.
Same question, Mr. Akhtar.
Thank you. So my view on healthcare is a simple one. I think there's two ends to any problem, and one end is on the patient side when it comes to healthcare. The other end is on the provider side. And so when we look at the patient or the user of healthcare, we need to ensure that they have complete unfettered access. In a civilized society, it is completely inhumane to think that a person, just because they don't have employment or because they don't have somebody who can provide a ride to get to a hospital or a doctor, that as a result of that, they are going to suffer, get sick, and die. I think that is absolutely immoral, inhumane, and it is a product of a society that has given up on its desire to care for the human, and instead we have prioritized economic gain. And this kind of talks, or this is sort of the reason why we have to look at the other side, which is the providers. And we have to ensure that providers are not creating market dominance by limiting the amount of people that go into the medical profession. And so if we create policies that prevent medical unions and medical organizations from limiting the amount of people that can become nurses and medical practitioners, we'll all be much better off.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Charbas.
Oh, that's easy. We need to enact Medicare for all. We're the only industrialized country that doesn't have universal health care. We have 25 million people who are uninsured in the United States. And even those who are insured can't afford sometimes to go seek care because they get huge out-of-pocket costs. The mere existence of a health insurance industry, in my mind, is some sort of crime. It's a block. It's a impediment for people to get care. Why should a profit motive of a health insurance company be determining what is the care that's required instead of a doctor? So the simple answer is, and the Green Party platform is that healthcare should be universal, and we should pass Medicare for all.
Thank you. And Mr. Pallone.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, Medicare for all is certainly a goal, but it's not one that we're going to achieve, in my opinion, with this Congress or any Congress in the near future. And so the most important thing is increased access to healthcare and affordability. And I would put it in three categories. In terms of increased access, we have to make sure the Affordable Care Act is strengthened. Trump and most Republicans are saying that they either want to repeal it or eliminate the subsidies. And without the subsidies, people would not be able to afford it. So we have to continue with the ACA and with the subsidies. Secondly, with regard to prescription drugs, increasingly that's a big part of your healthcare costs. And as I said before, I was the sponsor of negotiated prices for, excuse me, for prescription drugs under Medicare. But I'd like to see that expanded to everyone. And so I have a bill that would basically do that and would say that the negotiated prices, the cap on insulin, transparency, all these would be expanded to the people at large. And so that's how we have to do it. Increase access, increase affordability, and then we'll have a better healthcare system in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, and we'll start with Mr. Akhtar. It is, what steps would you support to curb gun violence in our country?
Well, that's a good question. Before I left the Bureau, I was on track to become a firearms instructor. So I'm a gun guy. I love guns. I enjoy playing with them. And I also see the value in having a Second Amendment and the ability to not only defend ourselves against potential criminals, but also against an overbearing government. However, there need to be confines on who is able to purchase a weapon. And my view is that it needs to be not based on somebody's worldview or their morality, or if somebody believes that they might be a threat to somebody else. All of that is subjective, and it's an easy way to start confiscating weapons and for an overbearing government to prevent people from having a right that our founders enshrined in the Constitution. But I do think proficiency is absolutely important. And so I think we should allow people to have guns if and only if they know how to use them safely, and if they can actually hit a target with them. Because even trained law enforcement officers, and again, Mr. Amatrano can attest to this, some cannot shoot over an 80% out of 100. So out of 50 rounds, only 40 are going to hit the target. That means 10 hit a kindergartner or somebody's grandmother. And so we need to ensure that standards are high, not only for normal people carrying guns or civilians carrying guns, but also for law enforcement officers carrying guns. And as long as we do that, I think we'll be okay.
Okay, thank you. Same question, Mr. Fegler.
Look, I think I'm unmuted. Thank you. We need to address the mental health crisis in this country, right? And follow through with the investigations that really need to occur, right? Gun rights really are a states' rights issue. And I think New Jersey does a really good job of ensuring that the proper people have access to guns. But it does become a mental health crisis, right? 50% of adults in their lives have a mental health crisis at some point in their lives, right? We absolutely need to spend resources and federal dollars into this mental health phenomenon that is occurring with today's generation. So I fully support the Second Amendment, right? It is written into our Constitution, but absolutely, we really need to address the mental health crisis to ensure that the right people have access to guns and the wrong people don't.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Amatrano.
This is a pretty easy one. I mean, first of all, most of the people committing crimes using guns, or they own the gun illegally to begin with. They look for victims, easy victims. So you let people have access to firearms if they want. You make it a lot easier for just law-abiding citizens to be able to carry firearms for their own safety. And then you just need strict enforcement for any crimes with guns, any violent crimes. They can't be this like revolving door. If somebody gets arrested and they get right back out, committing the same crime. Like, you gotta make an example. You gotta put them in prison for a while, just so people know that there's consequences.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Pallone.
Well, Sharon, we need common sense gun safety measures. And I would mention three, all of which I've supported or voted for. One is expanding criminal background checks. There are too many loopholes now. You can buy a gun at a gun show over the internet and a classified ad. These loopholes have to be eliminated. And so there's a criminal background check in every case. So that's number one. Number two is an assault weapons ban, which we had at one time, and then the Republicans let it expire. But if we had an assault weapons ban again, I would certainly support it, which I have in the past. We don't need these rifles or assault rifles that are, they're not for hunting purposes. They only serve to kill people. And then the third thing is to eliminate large capacity magazines, and as put a limit on the number of shots, if you will, that, magazines can hold a lot more than 10 rounds. I don't think that makes sense. And so these are three common sense measures that we could implement in the Congress, and we vote on them, but the Republicans usually vote against it and they don't become law.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Tarbus.
Well, this is a tough question because the Second Amendment is valued by so many people, but there is so much gun violence in our inner cities. I agree with Congressman Pallone on the measures that he was saying. I would add to require liability insurance for gun owners. The insurance industry has a lot of influence in setting policy, and so by requiring liability insurance, we would be able to enforce and bring to bear economic forces to the gun issue.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next question, and this one will start with Mr. Amatrano, and please move closer to the microphone. What actions would you take to address the threats facing this country due to climate change?
There's a lot of things we could do with climate change. I think we should start with the simplest thing is like just stop cutting down so many trees. Like I know where I live in Piscataway, like over the last few years, it's just wiped out acres of forest and trees for housing. And I get there's a housing crisis also, and we need more houses as population grows, but there has to be a balance. Trees, I feel like are the most important thing and the easiest thing we could do. I'll just end with that.
Okay, thank you. Next, let's go to Mr. Tarbus.
Well, I would enact a real Green New Deal. The Green New Deal calls for developing sustainable, renewable energy sources. Infrastructure needs to be green and energy efficient. And this could be done with high-paying union jobs. We need to set, right now, there's a Green New Deal and there's a real Green New Deal in proposal. The real Green New Deal brings up to 2035 net carbon zero. And I think that's a target that we should hit.
Okay, same question, Mr. Pallone.
Well, I mentioned before the Inflation Reduction Act, which it was another bill that I had a lot to do with. We passed. It's the biggest climate action initiative probably in the world. It involves, and I would accelerate these things, more emphasis on renewables. We're still going to have fossil fuels, but we have to get away from them and use more renewables, and that's solar, windmills, geothermal, you name it. And we provided some significant tax credits for all of those, and need to be strengthened. Also, electric vehicles, try to move towards electric vehicles and more mass transit, get people out of their cars if possible. And then I would also point out methane reduction. One of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas increases in the atmosphere and global warming is methane. And in the Inflation Reduction Act, we took some major measures. Again, that came out of my committee and was largely my initiative to reduce methane. That comes from oil and gas drilling, from gas and oil refining. A lot of that is in the state of New Jersey. And we have really cut back on that in our program for methane reduction. But all these things need to be accelerated if we're going to address climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fegler, same question.
Great. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think climate change is important, right? And there absolutely needs to be renewable energy sources. offshore wind, right, which Congressman Pallone is a big supporter of, that is going to destroy our beaches, our marine animals, our economy, our tourism, and whatnot, is not the way to do that, right? There are way better ways to do that. Nuclear energy is by far a better alternative to drive cost-effective and very clean, good energy. Mr. Congressman Pallone talked about electric cars. Well, if we all start plugging in our electric cars, where are we going to get the power to power those cars, right? Our grid system, I've had several blackouts this summer already. Our grid system simply can't handle it. So when we haphazardly rush to decarbonize, it's extremely frightening times. So this needs a lot of attention and a lot of focus, and I'm honored to be on stage tonight, or metaphorical stage, with the ranking member of the Energy Committee to talk about these issues, because it's of utmost importance. We absolutely need clean, good energy. Offshore wind is not the avenue to do so. There are better alternatives, and I'm excited to fight this fight.
Thank you. Mr. Akhtar.
I'm on this issue, I'm the greenest of the green. I'm sitting in the woods right now. I actually live in the woods. I love nature, and I think we need to do whatever possible to protect it. Unfortunately, a lot of the solutions proposed by your typical government official or your typical politician, they neglect some big gaps. So one big myth is that batteries and electric vehicles are going to solve our problems. Well, let me tell you something. 98% of the lithium supply chain is owned or controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. 98%. So if we were to switch everything to battery technology, and you and I all started driving plug-in hybrids, what Mr. Fegler said is correct. One, we're going to overwhelm the grid because we're all going to be plugged into the grid. But then number two, if my battery breaks down and it's during a conflict with China, and our military starts purchasing battery-based technologies for military purposes, we're going to get our butts kicked. And I talk about this in my book, America's Future Wars, how our solutions to problems need to also take into account different domains. We can't focus on each domain as a silo. It needs to be a wholesale solution. So my bottom line solution is the only long-term solution to climate change is by ending our culture of overconsumption. And that is the only real solution to this problem that we've created.
Thank you. There is a follow-up question. Some of you have already addressed part of it, but because it's so relevant to to CD6, I'm going to start with Mr. Amatrano, and very specifically, what is your view concerning the wind turbines and oil and gas drilling off the Jersey Shore?
I'm against them. I definitely think there needs to be more research, and they should be stopped immediately until we can get some unbiased research done, because there's been an alarming amount of whales washing up and other sea life, and it can't be just a coincidence. So I would say put a stop to it right now until we can get further research done.
Okay. Mr. Fegler?
Yeah, I'm very against offshore wind, as I said already. There is so many better ways to drive energy than offshore wind. I mean, there's a direct correlation between the sonaring activity, right? We've had 44 whales since December of 2022 wash ashore along either New York or New Jersey. I mean, that's an alarming rate. I've visited some of the NOAA sites and got briefed on it. And I live right here in the Highlands, New Jersey, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean right now, and can see the beautiful ocean. This is going to destroy that. I am not for renewable energy, but offshore wind is not a viable option. So yes, I will fight offshore energy.
Okay. Mr. Pallone?
Well, Sharon, it is absolutely false, as Mr. Figler says, to say that sonar or any of the preconditions, if you will, to offshore windmills cause the whales to die. That's not true factually. NOAA, all the agencies and all the science say just the opposite, that the reason is climate change that is bringing in the things that the whales feed on, specifically menhaden, closer to shore, and then they get stuck in the shipping lanes and they get hit by the ships and other boats. That's the cause of the whale deaths. Bottom line is that wind power is important. Whether it's offshore, it's onshore, it's an important part of our trying to address climate action. And climate action is is necessary, because what's happening is with all these extreme weather events, whether it's Hurricane Milton or Helene or all the others, Sandy, Ida, that we've faced in the 6th Congressional District, the planet is warming. And as a consequence, our health and our way of life is being impacted. So we have an obligation to move towards renewables, even while we continue using fossil fuels. But we do not need to drill off the coast of New Jersey. And I've worked very hard to make sure that that drilling does not take place. We have a 5-year moratorium in place that prohibits offshore drilling for oil and gas, and I will continue to fight for that.
Thank you. Mr. Akhtar?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So a lot of folks here have used the word common sense, but unfortunately, a lot of the things being mentioned, when you put them all together, the common sense disappears, right? So I'll give you an example. We need energy. We need it in a way that's secure, but we don't want to drill for oil. We need energy. We want it to be renewable, but Mr. Fegler's view is going to be ruined if we put up some wind turbines. I'm all for not ruining the Jersey Shore, but we've got to have a solution, and I'd rather not have a nuclear meltdown in my backyard. And so the only solution out there is potentially wind, and there are going to be consequences to these things. But again, if we don't get to the core issue of changing our culture of overconsumption, this is the only solution to our problem of having enough energy. I think the other thing to think about is when we say that we don't want oil and we want only renewables, we also have to think about what that means for us when we think about quality of life. Everyone in the beginning of this conversation was talking about how prices are too high or how people can't afford to live. Well, here's the thing. Fuel costs and oil costs are a big part of that. Now, people might have mixed opinions of President Trump, but when he was president, I paid $1.51 for a gallon of gas. And I haven't seen anything close to that in the last 4 years. And so I am fed up of high prices. And the only way to push back against that in all sectors is to have access to energy and the type of energy that we produce here at home. And the only energy that we are number one at is oil.
Thank you. Mr. Tarbus.
With respect to the offshore drilling, the Green Party position is that we need to transition away from any type of fossil fuel infrastructure being built. With offshore wind, I think we see there's two competing views about the whales. Mr. Pallone says that it's certainly false, that it's not due to the sonar and the offshore wind infrastructure research. And other folks, Mr. Fegler, I believe says that it is the whale deaths are due to offshore activities for the wind industry. I don't know, and I don't have a firm opinion, but I think we should work to understand whether or not the whale deaths are related to the wind industry or not, and then make a decision. But wind as a energy source needs to be developed either onshore or offshore.
Okay, thank you. Next question, we will start with Mr. Pallone, and it's one I'm sure you're all expecting. What is your stance on the access to abortion? What federal actions do you support?
I am in favor of the Women's Protection Act, which basically would bring back Roe v. Wade as the law of the land. I think that it was a tragedy that President Trump and the Republicans worked so hard to put justices on the Supreme Court that would overturn Roe v. Wade and now result in this patchwork of states, some of which have practically eliminated abortion as well as the efforts to eliminate IVF and contraception. All of this is happening because of Republican policies to overturn Roe v. Wade. And so what we need is a national federal legislation that goes back to Roe v. Wade, permits abortion, permits IVF, permits contraception. These are basic rights of privacy which need to be enshrined by the federal government. And this idea that we're simply going to allow each state to make its own decision does not work, because as a consequence, women are suffering. They have to travel to other states. The doctors are being jailed Doctors aren't even being trained in women's health issues because of the fear that somehow that's going to be criminalized. And so the bottom line is that's what we need. We need a national legislation, which is in our committee, and we've passed in the House, that would protect women's health.
Thank you. Mr. Amatrano.
Yes, as far as abortion goes, I have my personal opinions and beliefs, but that doesn't matter. I mean, the government just has no right to tell anybody what to do with their own health care. That's between them and their doctor. So I'll just leave it like that. The government needs to stay out of the issue of abortion.
Okay. Mr. Akhtar?
Thank you, ma'am. So let me start with this. We should always talk about abortion with an understanding that it's an awful thing and that nobody should go around being rough and callous about what abortion is and whether it's something that ought to be the primary option for any person. We need to make sure that folks have access to things along the way that would prevent the need for a person to seek out an abortion. And so, as Mr. Pallone said, we need to ensure that there are certain things that people have access to. And so I fully support IVF, I fully support birth control, and even the morning after pills and such things. Abortion, on the other hand, I do have a relatively restrictive opinion on. I think the court ought to be the one that makes decisions on these things, as it is a constitutional, as whether access to abortion should be broad or narrow is a constitutional matter and not necessarily a matter that we want legislated every single Congress. And so my view is there should be common sense limitations on what abortion is or who has access to abortion and when. But we always need to ensure that a mother's life is given priority over a fetus's life. Extant life is greater than potential life. And so if we can come up with a policy that allows for that, I think we'll be in good shape. But I don't think we should have a complete, broad, open policy on everyone gets an abortion, whether it's the day before the baby is born or whether it's week 1. But I think I got the stop sign, so I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tarbus.
Well, the Democrats have been in power for many years and had a choice or had the ability to codify Roe v. Wade, but they didn't do it. My personal opinion is that this is a healthcare issue, and most decisions should be made by between a doctor and a woman. We need to have some sort of national right codified that gives women autonomy on their bodies. And there are some laws that just don't make sense to me, such as heartbeat laws, because electrical activity in a group of organizing cells at 6 weeks is not a heartbeat. And there's a lot of the pro-life people seem to try to manipulate emotions in this way. So we need a national standard that gives women a right to the health care that they seek. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question.
I didn't get to answer that one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot somebody left you out. Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks for asking me. Look, I think that the Democratic Party has done first off, I respect the court's decision, right? And they pushed this back to the states level. And I think the Democratic Party has done a fantastic job of fear-mongering and gaslighting vulnerable women on this topic, right? As a Republican, right, we are for families, we are for IVF. States are doing a great job, right? Especially in places like New Jersey. And right, this is codified into state law here in New Jersey. And I think that a lot of states need to work out their issues, right? And it becomes the will of the voters and the people and their decisions to weigh in on this topic, right? And if you don't like an issue that's occurring in Oklahoma, right, and Mr. Pallone is a big advocate for universal abortion rights, right? Hey, in their current stance, he should move to Oklahoma and really fight those issues down there, right? This is not a federal issue, it's a state's issue, and I respect the court's decisions here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question, and we'll start with Mr. Fegler, so we don't leave you out again, sorry. Next question. New Jerseyans are concerned about the economy and inflation. What actions and legislation do, if any, do you think the federal government should take to alleviate these concerns?
Sure.
Yes.
As I mentioned kind of in my opening statements, right? Government spending directly leads to inflation, right? And we need to manage a budget. And the experience that I have managing a business, right? Managing payroll and paychecks, right? We need to stop spending money recklessly. I am all for supporting fantastic causes like Social Security and healthcare and whatnot. But far too much money of our country's money is being spent recklessly, right? So when we need to manage the checkbook, right, and get things under control. That will directly hit people's wallets. Programs like the SALT tax that have disappeared are very important in New Jersey, and I will fight like all heck to bring that back because that's real money in New Jersey in the 6th district residents' pocket. So, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Pallone.
Well, I think it's ironic that Scott and the Republicans talk about government spending when they have ballooned the deficit beyond control. You know, they passed this tax bill under President Trump that basically not only ballooned the deficit, but made it very difficult for people in the middle class to get any kind of tax relief, or particularly New Jersey, where they capped the SALT, state and local deductions, so people couldn't deduct more than $10,000 annually from the federal income tax. The bottom line is that we have to make things more affordable, and that means a tax policy that favors the middle class, that allows you to go back to the situation where you could deduct your state and local taxes fully. And then also, you know, do other initiatives that address affordability. Like I said, by reducing the cost of prescription drugs and expanding that Medicare provision to the rest of the country. Also, our committee has been trying to go after collusion by oil and gas companies with OPECs to try to bring the cost of gasoline down at the pump. We've got to go after these greedy corporations that are basically taking advantage and making it possible for them to not abide by the law, whereas everybody else has to, and it's simply not fair.
Thank you. Mr. Akhtar, same question.
Thank you. Well, I think it's ironic that the candidate who's gotten the most money from corporations calls out greedy corporations. But going back to the issue, when it comes to ensuring that folks have I'm sorry, can you remind me of the question?
Sure. Oh, wait, yes, I will. Sure, hold on. Here's the question. Here is the question exactly as I asked it. New Jerseyans are concerned about the economy and inflation. What actions and legislation, if any, do you think the federal government should be taking to alleviate these concerns?
Thank you.
Start his time now, would you, please?
So inflation, it's there's a lot of factors that go into inflation. And my background is in economics and finance. And so looking at it from that perspective, it's a very technical thing, right? Meaning that if you're putting more money into government spending, as Mr. Fegler was alluding to, you're going to end up with more money chasing fewer goods, which leads to inflation costs, and that's going to cause everyone to have to pay more. But the bigger problem is actually going back to another thing Mr. Fegler said, because a lot of what he said was very clever and very correct. It's that if you spend a lot of money on a lot of foolish things, you're going to end up with a lot of money wasted, and people are going to have higher taxes, and inflation is going to be pushing up costs of everything. And so if we stop sending money overseas for foreign wars and foreign aid, I think that would be great. And Mr. Pallone, maybe we can have you talk a little bit more about what Congress is doing there, because it seems like the Congress that you have been in has been sending more and more money to foreign governments, whether they're using it to violate human rights or kill people. And at the same time, we need to ensure that we're using common sense policies to allow our economy to create jobs and to pump oil and to do the things necessary to push down prices for average people. Because yes, we can have this policy platform that appeals to the Davos crowd, or we can have one that appeals to the average person who just cares about how much they're paying for their gas to get to work their minimum wage job. And so I think my view is let's focus on the real people and start there.
Thank you. Mr. Amatrano?
Yeah, so well, I mean, you cut out reckless spending, wasteful spending. That'll keep the deficit from increasing. Then you got to make some tough decisions of where you're going to make the cuts so you bring down the deficit. Then you won't be forced to print money, which basically dilutes the money that's already in the system that we have in our pockets. I mean, I think that's the easiest way just to reduce inflation and keep it from growing anymore.
Okay. And lastly on this, Mr. Tarbus?
Well, I think that we need to understand what is causing the inflation in our economy on one side. I don't agree with the notion that government spending is causing the inflation, not when corporate profits are at an all-time high. The federal government has the power to regulate industries. There's so much consolidation in some of the most important industries, such as like the meat industry. I think it's controlled by just a handful, 4 or 5 companies. That gives them incredible pricing power. So I think we need to understand where inflation is coming from. Government spending, in my opinion, is not a bad thing. In fact, one thing to help the middle class and working class folks would be a federal jobs guarantee and raising the federal minimum wage. A federal jobs guarantee would be similar to the New Deal instituted by Rockefeller back during the Depression. Federal jobs guarantee would provision jobs in the green sector and for like housing and healthcare. And so that's how I would approach it. Understand inflation and prop up the incomes and the earning power of the people. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next question, and we're going to start with Mr. Amatrano. What about student debt? What relief, if any, would you offer to individuals who have already accumulated large amounts of such debt? And what actions would you take to continue to encourage student involvement in higher education, but to minimize the accumulation of future student debt?
I mean, as a libertarian, I'm all against the government, paying off anybody's debt, because it basically then goes to the taxpayer, because the government has no money, it's the taxpayer's money. So it's not fair to somebody else that has medical debt or debt for buying a house. It's like, why shouldn't the government pay off their debt as well? The best thing we could do is, like in high school, educate kids before they go to college about how much it's going to actually cost them, how long it's going to take them to pay off, what the total cost will actually be when they take out this loan, and if it's worth it for the career field they're going in. And I mean, I think that's the best thing. Leave it up to individuals to make the smart choices.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fegler, same question.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. I graduated college with some debt and I worked my butt off and paid it out. Look, I think college students should have the opportunity to refinance, but they absolutely need to go into college understanding the debts that they're going to take out and essentially do an ROI on that, right? We cannot train these generations and educate these generations to come that they'll just be government handouts and that we will, right, there'll be a bailout. They need to be absolutely accountable for it, but there shouldn't be any malicious lending, and there needs to be absolute clear communication and transparency on the cost of tuition and whatnot, especially specifically with the loan. But the only action I would take is the allow the students to refinance their debt.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tarbus?
Well, one thing that we should allow is students to include the student debt in bankruptcy proceedings. That's important. I think people point to Joe Biden as being an architect of carving out student debt from bankruptcy. hearings. But meanwhile, I think that the federal government, folks misunderstand how the federal government financing works, and it won't cost anybody anything to just wipe the student debt off the books. And I think that's what we should do. And in addition to that, higher education should be free. We have the resources. If we can spend $1 trillion on our military every year, we have the resources to provide basic things like healthcare, housing, and in this case, education to our young folks. It's one of the biggest tricks of capitalism is to start off a worker with incredible debt from college. It binds it binds them to jobs that they may not want to stay in, and we need to relieve that and change the system of college financing altogether.
Thank you. Mr. Akhtar?
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Tarbo said it right. This is the way we do education financing in the United States. It's essentially the government working with corporations to create debt peons and a system of debt peonage. If you go on my website, you'll see some stats on this, but it was really when the federal government got involved in the student loan market that the prices of higher education started to skyrocket. And this is a basic economic equation. When more money is chasing the same amount of resources, that resource is going to be able to charge more for that same thing. And so what has happened over the last 40 years is that more and more people have been getting more and more debt for sillier and sillier programs. And as a result of that, they are in debt up to their eyeballs. They have mortgages that they can't pay off, and they have kids that they can't feed. And so I am completely and totally in support of wiping out this debt. Because unlike Mr. Fegler, I don't believe that my success is a result of my own doing. I think circumstances also play a role. And so I don't want to punish people because their circumstances didn't work out as favorably as mine. And so, yes, I took on boatloads of debt, almost $400,000 to get my fancy Ivy League degree. But I don't think that just because I did it and was able to get out of it, that if somebody is not able to do that, that we should punish them for the rest of their lives. And so I am 100% in support of canceling out all federal student debt and ending the federal government's involvement in the federal student loan market to get prices back down to earth.
Thank you. Mr. Pallone?
Well, Sharon, we need more student debt relief. And I have to say that President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the Democrats in Congress worked hard over the last few years to provide significant student debt relief, but the Republicans fought us at every stage, taking us to court, having the courts overturn these student debt relief programs because they just don't care. They don't want to do anything about student debt relief. And so we need to institute those student debt relief programs, some of those particularly for teachers or for police and for fire, people involved in public safety. Also, we need a different way of providing for students to go to college. And, Hillary Clinton, for example, was a big advocate, as I have been, of saying that the government would pay for your level of education that you would have if you went to a public university, like Rutgers, for example. You could go to a private university as well, but the level of help from the federal government to pay for it would be the cost of public education. And also expanding the GI Bill, which we have for the military. All these things have to be done because the current costs of higher education are beyond the reach of more and more people, and it shouldn't be that way in America.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question is going to start with Mr. Tarbus, and it's one of those questions that I know you've expected. What about immigration and asylum seekers? What short and long-term actions are needed to improve our current laws regarding immigration and asylum? Mr. Tarbus.
Well, short term, we need to provision more personnel at the border to process folks who are coming in. And with respect to asylum seekers, we need a process to determine which people are actually eligible to seek asylum, and that's the most important thing. I think that we need to be able to process folks at the border. With respect to asylum seekers, we need to be able to bring them in because that's the law. And that's my take on it, is the asylum seekers need to be processed at the border effectively.
Thank you. Mr. Armatrano?
Yes, the first thing we need to do is secure the border, just to get it under control. And then we need to encourage people to come here legally, make the process easier, hire more people to speed up the process, lower the cost of the process. You know, a lot of people have to pay for lawyers to do it. Like, it shouldn't be that complicated. That'll be the best way. Just simplify it so there's no need for people that are coming here just to work, get education, start a family, that they need to sneak in here. There should be no reason, and then be able to reduce the people that are coming in here to commit crimes and do other nefarious things. Thank you.
Mr. Pallone?
Well, there's tremendous hypocrisy on the part of Trump and the Republican leadership in Congress, because we had a bipartisan bill that passed the Senate that would have addressed border security and improved the immigration system. And Trump just killed it because he wanted to make it a campaign issue. But if you look at that bipartisan bill, it basically tells you what needs to be done. First of all, a lot more border patrol for enforcement. With regard to asylum, you'd have more judges and the courts would move quicker, so legitimate asylum seekers would be able to come in the country and the others would not. Also, with regard to family reunification for people that are married and they can't come here because of restrictions, that we would allow for family reunification. But beyond that, I think for the people that are here, particularly DACA, people that came here and through no fault of their own, or are here and undocumented, we should have a system whereby if you've been here for a period of time, say 5 years, you haven't gotten in trouble in the law, you paid your taxes, you learn English, that you go on a pathway to citizenship. And particularly that should be true for DACA, for the young people who came here with their families and through no fault of their own are stuck in this limbo. So we could accomplish all this with that bipartisan bill that Trump killed, and passing immigration reform for those who are here.
Thank you. Mr. Fegler, same question.
Thank you. And I'd like to also just remind Congressman Pallone that Trump is not in the current office, and our current administration is the Biden-Harris administration, and they have executive authority to do these things. 16 million illegals have crossed into our border. Look, that bill that Mr. Pallone was talking about, right, that only applies after 5,000 illegals enter. We absolutely need to understand who is coming into this country and understand their claims for asylum. I am very cognizant that this country was built by immigrants. All 4 of my grandparents came to this country. They came over legally, though, right? And this country was built on legal immigration. We need massive immigration reform. And from a congressman that's been in office for 36 years, I would have loved to have seen that achieved. But first and foremost, we must secure our border, and there is no messing around with it. I grew up in a 9/11 time, in a 9/11 life, and I will do whatever I can to ensure that something like that never happens. We need to understand who is coming into our country, and they need to be properly vetted and secured.
Thank you. Mr. Akhtar?
Thank you, ma'am. So let me say this. First, I don't like when the immigration issue and the asylum issue is used for fear-mongering. And so to conflate asylum seekers with 9/11, I think Mr. Fegler is outrageous, right? I'm a former federal law enforcement officer. I work counterintelligence matters. I know who's coming over the border. And yes, some bad guys are getting through, but it's not because we have an asylum policy or because we allow for immigration. So I think it's important not to conflate the two issues and to make every person with skin like mine feel like they're some sort of invader or enemy. So I'll start with that. And then I'll say this. I think we do need common sense, and we need a border. We need border security. But if we're going to be dropping bombs on people's heads all over the world, or funding the dropping of bombs on people's houses all over the world, basic reciprocity and golden rule type of thinking has to come into play here. And so if we destroy your country, whoever you are out there, I think you ought to have a right to come knock on our door and say, I'm seeking asylum. And we shouldn't ask any more questions after that. You just show me a picture of your demolished house and an American bomb sitting next to it, and I'll be okay with giving you asylum at that point. So I think we need legal immigration. We need to let people in after we destroy their countries. But then also we need to end the high skill immigration that everyone loves to talk about, because those donors, they donate to politicians. But really, those high skill immigrants are taking all the jobs that would make the quality of life of real Americans a lot better, and of legal immigrants who came here generations ago a lot better too. So I think we need to focus on our own people first, and to let people in when we cause them harm.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with Mr. Akhtar for the next question. Actually, we have two questions that are more on international relations, I would say. And the first one is, I think we can get him in. Would you support a ceasefire with an arms embargo to Israel?
Yes, absolutely. I am as anti-Israel as it gets. Israel has proven itself a genocidal nation. 100 years ago, almost 100 years ago, we were talking about Germany and what it was doing in the Holocaust and how it was abhorrent and how long it took for the world to see what was really going on and to get involved. It took us almost 5 years before the United States decided to get involved in World War II and to stop what was going on. And it was only after we invaded Germany and Poland that we saw what was really happening. And I think now we are seeing something very similar taking place in the Middle East. We are seeing the extermination of an entire people. And by federal law, we are required to investigate this. Title 18 is the US code that the FBI is bound to investigate based upon. And in Title 18, genocide is prohibited by a US national or by anybody that travels to the US, and it is an extraterritorial law, meaning that we, as American federal law enforcement officers, ought to be investigating this and ensuring that if a genocide is indeed taking place, that we are not complicit in it, and that none of our government officials are complicit in it. And so I call upon everybody here to pledge that we will at least investigate this, because we don't want international bodies doing these sorts of investigations, but we definitely have probable cause to look into this and have our own federal law enforcement determine what is going on in Gaza and the rest of the Middle East, and whether Israel and the IDF are complicit or are committing a genocide.
Mr. Pallone.
Well, I totally disagree with Mr. Fahad. Israel is not a genocidal nation. It was the Jewish people for which the genocide was committed against during the Nazi Holocaust. Israel is not the genocidal nation. I am 100% support of Israel. I voted to send arms to Israel in the supplemental appropriations bill that we had. I would not cut off arms to Israel. We can't have a unilateral ceasefire. A ceasefire is good if it's negotiated between Israel and its enemies. But the fact of the matter is, these enemies, Hezbollah and also Hamas, they're the terrorist organizations that attacked Israel initially. And it's all about Iran. Iran is financing all of it. Iran is an enemy of the United States. If you think for 1 minute that we can just simply lay down our arms and have a unilateral ceasefire, Iran will take advantage of that. You see what they're doing. They've been financing these terrorist regimes for over a century, for over a decade now. And so we cannot, we have to be supportive of Israel. If we can negotiate something for a ceasefire, that's a good thing. But I don't know how that's possible right now, given these terrorist organizations like Hezbollah and Hamas that are simply hell-bent on destroying the state of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. Pallone. Next, Mr. Amatrano.
Yeah, I don't think we have any business funding any of these wars. We have no business sending resources, men, anything, because we choose one side, we fund that side, and it's usually for our own benefit. The more we get involved in other countries, it seems like the worse they are when we leave. The only thing I would say is if both sides want us to mediate the conflict, then we would do it, but not from a military point of view or perspective. And thank you.
Okay. Mr. Tarbus? You're muted. Please unmute.
I agree a lot with Mr. Akhtar, a lot of what he said. The image of Israel and the reality of Israel are two different things. As far as negotiating a ceasefire or arms embargo, I think we need to put an arms embargo on Israel because the Netanyahu government is not interested in negotiating. Just the other day, there was an article in Haaretz and also the Times of Israel, and it said that Netanyahu's government is not seeking to revive hostage talks, and the political leadership is pushing for the gradual annexation of large parts of the Gaza Strip. Annexation of large parts of the Gaza Strip. That sounds like ethnic cleansing to me. And we need to understand the history of the state of Israel. The state of Israel was created in 1948 through massive ethnic cleansing. 750,000 people were driven from their homes violently by terrorist gangs, the Stern Gang, the Irgun, and this is all objective fact. And the borders of Israel are not well defined, and they're constantly seeking to expand them. And we see that in Gaza. There's already talk about building more settlements in Gaza, and there's been a slow motion ethnic cleansing on the West Bank where armed settlers are taking over Palestinian homes. And so we definitely need an arms embargo. We need common sense policy towards Israel and Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. Tarbus. Mr. Fegler.
Well, I guess just a quick little history lesson. I just celebrated Jewish New Year, which was year 5,785. So a little different than the numbers, I guess, that you just came up with. Look, the war ends as soon as the hostages are released, right? I was in Europe on October 7th. I was traveling with Jewish people. I watched them take off their Stars of David with fear in their eyes for a Holocaust 2.0. My mother is Jewish. My wife is Jewish. Israel and its safety is the most important thing to me. Look, the war ends when the hostages are released, and that's as simple as that. I actually agree with Congressman Pallone. Iran is behind this whole thing, and we need to cut the head off the snake and focus our efforts on Iran. But release the hostages.
Thank you. I think I see the time has caught up with us, and I'm going to have to go right into concluding statements. And because we did a random, let's see. Yes, the first opening statement, and just to remind you, you each have 1 minute to let us know why you're running and why we should vote for you. And the first one to speak will be Fahad Akar.
Thank you, ma'am. So, look, I'm really grateful for all of you hosting us today and having the opportunity to speak to potential voters in the district. My platform is relatively simple. I'm pro-competence, I'm pro-parent, I'm anti-war, and I'm anti-tax. And none of these positions are pulled out of thin air. It took a career of work in government and at the highest levels of financial services and consulting, as well as a lot of education to come to these conclusions as them being best for what our nation needs in this moment. And I think we need to break out of the two-party system, which has really become a one-party system where there isn't much difference on the key issues and the amount of spending we're going to do as a government. And so I think whether you vote for me or one of the other three non-Republican or Democrat candidates, you're doing a huge service to this nation. And so that's what I urge you all to do come November 5th.
Thank you. Next speaker will be Herb Tarbus.
Well, thank you, Sharon. The choice is very clear. We can move to a new paradigm, or we can maintain the status quo, which has brought us to this point in history, a time where American citizens are producing and providing the weapons and munitions being used by an extremist foreign government to ethnically cleanse men, women, and children from their homeland. How did we get here? Well, we have a highly dysfunctional two-party political system, a system which has been captured by corporate and foreign interests. I believe we can change the world by transforming our political system, and this is where ranked choice voting comes in. Ranked choice voting is the first step in a series of reforms which will lead to a multi-party democracy with proportional representation, a new system less susceptible to corporate capture, a new paradigm which focuses on peace, people, and the planet rather than profits. Can we do it? It's going to be hard, but I say we give it a shot. That's why I'm running to help make a vision for the future. And I think folks should support the Green Party, and let's enact ranked choice voting. And thank you to the league.
Thank you. Matthew Armatrano?
I'd just like to thank the League of Women Voters once again for putting this all together. I'm running on the platform of greatly reducing the federal government, giving the power back to the people in the states. The individuals, they make their own decisions. The only thing I ask the voters is to not vote, just vote by party. Actually do a little bit of research on each of the candidates and pick the one that you think is best for you. And if that's me, that'd be great. It'd be an honor to serve. If not, I'll continue, helping any way I can.
Thank you. Scott Figler?
Well, thank you again, League of Women Voters, for organizing tonight. Tonight was a lot of fun. Tonight, we've laid out very different versions of our futures. Congressman Pallone, after over 30 years in Washington, he has consistently supported policies that are out of touch with what our communities need. He's been an advocate for offshore wind projects off the Jersey Shore, despite the concerns that these projects raise for our environment, our economy, and the coastal communities that depend on tourism and fishing. He also voted against the Stop CCP Act, leaving our country vulnerable to foreign influence from the Chinese Communist Party, which poses a serious threat to our national security. And on top of that, he opposed Keeping Violent Offenders Off Our Streets Act, choosing politics over public safety. What I find most troubling is his track record on protecting women and children. He worked to undermine Title IX, which protected the fairness and equality in women's sports for decades, and he voted against deporting illegal migrant sex offenders, jeopardizing the safety of our most vulnerable citizens. Protecting women and children should never be a political issue. It's a moral duty. It's time for fresh leadership in Washington. We need representatives who will secure our borders, stand up to foreign threats, and protect the American dream for future generations to come.
Thank you. And Mr. Pallone, Frank Pallone Jr.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum. Look, if you want a congressman who's going to get things done and address affordable issues for New Jersey, if you want someone who's going to make corporations pay their fair share, end tax breaks for billionaires and corporations, and try to come up with a tax code that actually provides tax cuts for middle-class people and brings back fully the SALT deduction. If you want a congressman that's going to address healthcare affordability issues and make it clear that a woman have a right to choose an abortion, then I would ask that you support me. I will always put people over politics and hope that I can earn your trust and ask for your support on November 5th when you go to the polls. Thank you again.
Thank you. And a huge thank you to the candidates tonight for participating in this informative forum. And certainly thank you to all the audience members out there, the voters who wanted to be informed voters. This forum has been recorded and will be posted on the sponsoring league websites. Ours is lwvmonmouth.org. It will also be available on vote411.org, which is our league online voter guide. A reminder that the recording can be shared, can only be shared in its entirety. No excerpt or any little pieces that's not permitted. So stay with us, please, for another minute so we can give you a few words about voting in the upcoming election. There are 3 ways for registered voters to vote. And I'll remind you that today was the last day to register to vote. So I hope you're all registered voters. The first way, vote by mail ballot. To receive a vote by mail ballot, follow the instructions at vote.nj.gov. Cast your ballot by mailing it, by placing it at any drop box in your county, or by delivering it to the Board of Elections in your county. In-person early voting is the second way. You cast your ballot using a voting machine at any early voting site in your county during the 9-day early voting period from Saturday, October 26th through Sunday, November 3rd, and just choose a time that's convenient for you. And finally, you can vote in person on Election Day, Tuesday, November 5th. Cast your ballot using a voting machine at your assigned local polling site. The polls will be open on Election Day from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And certainly for any information on voting questions, visit vote.nj.gov. And again, thank you to the candidates and to the audience, and good evening.